Greetings, shipmates. Welcome to this edition of Voyage of Rediscovery, a commemoration of the fall 1998 journey on Semester at Sea. Before we jump in, or shall I say dive in, a reminder that you can follow our voyage, access other conversations, check out all participant bios, learn about and contribute to the fall 1998 commemorative scholarship, as well as order swag from sas25th.com, and that's SAS25th.com. Dolphins, portside! All right, excuse me. Let's start the show. In today's episode, we'll speak with Hamilton Souther. Hamilton attended the University of Colorado, Boulder, and grew up in Los Gatos, California. As an anthropology major and a rather astute observer of the human condition, Hamilton will share his impressions of life in Japan and, as he puts it, how he made a huge cultural mistake in India. Hop on board, everyone. The ship is leaving. The first thing that I wanted to ask about was there an inspiration or a reason why you chose to go on Semester at Sea?
I think the inspiration was the idea to see the world, and it was to expand our understanding of, the rest of the world. We kind of taught it in this closed classroom environment. I thought it was important to, just see a lot of other cultures. And I was studying anthropology while I was at the university. So to see other cultures was really important. It was also to expand our horizons and also the opportunity to go around the world.
Did you know anyone previously who had gone on it, or did you go on the journey with a friend from home or from school?
No, I went on the journey alone, but my brother had gone on the journey 2 years before that. So he had already been on Semester at Sea. So he had, come back with rave reviews. And so it was clearly something I wanted to do.
When thinking about the trip, obviously you mentioned you want to see the world. Was there a particular port that you were looking more forward to than any others?
Everything in Asia. Those are the parts of the world I hadn't explored at all. So, I think that was really exciting, just to see different parts of Asia and be introduced to those cultures.
Do any particular memories stand out from your first port of call, or any that followed subsequently?
Yeah, if we call Vancouver the first port of call, right? It was interesting to just meet everybody and just the process of how we all became part of the boat, and kind of then the long voyage across the thing. There are a lot of memories that stick out though from this. Like, there's still so many clear memories to the day. I don't have exactly one. There were just so many. When we went through the typhoons, that was crazy. The size of the waves was unbelievable. So that still sticks out in my mind when we were in the troughs looking up at the size of the waves that we went through. It's just like the immediate immersion into the culture. So we show up in Japan and it's just like you still feel the waves, you got sea legs, and you're just like, hey, walk off into the town. And then just walking around. And I think the memory I had that most sticks out from Japan was just how blatantly different it was as a vibe from daytime to nighttime. So daytime was like this, what seemed like very strict, very ordered society. And at nighttime, it seemed like all the neon came out in this futuristic world that we were not living in, in Western United States at all. They had technology that came to the US much later than that. And it looked like half the people were on their way to some kind of EDM festival, would be like the closest thing I could relate it to, but they weren't. That was just how they were dressing and what they were doing as a culture. I thought that was fascinating. And then the mix with that to as soon as you stepped outside of the city, this unbelievably peaceful, serene countryside and very calm, very quiet energy that the whole place had. So I think all of that really stood out.
Was that the first time you experienced that kind of juxtaposition?
Yeah, I think in the States we had experienced it when you go on a deep backpacking trip or something like that, and you really get away from things, but not so close, not right there in your face. And I think what made that so pronounced was the fact of just how it was during the day and at night. So the nighttime looked like, for me, this futuristic world that I had only dreamed of. It was a bit Blade Runner, mixed with a little bit of Burning Man, festival, EDM, Daisy Music, carnival kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, it's just countryside has nothing to do with that at all. Literally, like people doing Tai Chi, super relaxed, walking through these, beautiful paths and stuff. So yeah, I think that was really just very swift cultural changes from one environment to another.
Were there any others that you had a similar type of impression, not necessarily a juxtaposition or dichotomy, but where you were arrested by how different or unfamiliar it was?
I think in a way, each culture represented that. But when we went to India, I thought that was like the first moment I saw something that really couldn't be related at all to what was going on back home. So I just like branched out on my own, and I just went out into the city, and I found myself in a situation where I had some like candies and some pens and stuff I was giving out to some kids. And it was like by a gas station or whatever. I was like just out of the car, out of the taxi, on my feet. And within 30 seconds, 2,000 people that had rushed out of everywhere to like get this free stuff. And it had turned into a mob. And I ran to a wall, jumped up on the wall thinking I could like jump down and away from this mob. And I looked down and it was just a public latrine, just filled with, unbelievable amount of human feces. And so that blocked me one direction, and I had to get back now through the mob to the car. So I pushed my way through the mob, just being like mauled in every direction, and then got into the car. That was probably like 50 yards. So I go through that, and it was just now packed people, like, the way you'd think of like a rock concert or something, just packed. So I got through that into the car, and then the car was being shaken, by hundreds of people. And I had never seen anything like that. And that was, for some pieces of candy that were being given out. And I realized I had made a huge cultural mistake doing that, but I had no reference to even know how that would have been triggered. I think showed me what like true extreme poverty really was for the first time. Like I thought of it, but I had never seen that level of just sort of frenzy for anything. And so, yeah, I think that really stood out as well.
Wow, that sounds terrifying. And I can relate to those experiences both in India in a number of different ways. Well, how did you manage to process that? Do you think it impacted how you chose then to interact with people moving forward?
One, I think I was a lot more culturally sensitive after that. I realized like, so some of actions in our mind that we might not think are going to have this huge reaction or like chain reaction really could. So I think I started to walk a little lighter within some of the other countries that we went to. But I think more than anything, the entirety of that experience became just a chain reaction for kind of what really became the rest of my life.
I definitely want to hear about the rest of your life. I want to stay in the moment. We're going to come forward in a little bit, but you have mentioned two different occasions, I think, where you were traveling solo. Was that your modus operandi when you were there? Did you have people you traveled with, or was this your vision for the experience was as an individual?
I think there was both. I remember what I thought was really special about the whole experience on the boat was the fluidity of social interaction. And so there were places where it was kind of cliquey in some ways and stuff, but it wasn't the overwhelming dominance of the experience. And so there was time to be able to get away on your own and have individual experience if you wanted it. But there was also a ton of people that were, gathering and forming little groups to go to different excursions and different kinds of just places to go see and hang out. And then there were also like the organized events and stuff, but I did very few of the organized events. I did most of the exploring on my own. And I would find that I would either find 2 or 3 people that wanted to go to the same place, or I would just go on my own and end up finding them there. Everywhere we went, we would end up running into shipmates somewhere, which I thought was like unbelievably fun. It was very spontaneous. And there was always a helping hand from anywhere, any direction. So I thought all of that was like really, really unique, but I didn't have like a specific motive. I'm going to go do this alone or anything. I think it was like really flow state at that time. And it was just exploring what life was as we kind of walked through these other cultures.
Yeah, you talk about running into people and there's a serendipitousness associated with it. How has that influenced your approach to travel maybe now?
I think that those kinds of experiences showed me that you can really trust the world. And yeah, you have to be intelligent about how you navigate, but you don't have to approach it from a position of fear. And you can really just kind of allow that serendipity to unfold all the time. And so, post-university, that guided a tremendous amount of my life in the way that I approached where I ultimately ended up. And it still does. I think there's a tremendous amount of serendipity associated with the world. That was like a little microcosm, but everywhere I've really been, I've always found people that were really supportive, very helpful, welcomed me into other cultures, and have been, kind of a continuation of those experiences.
On the continuation, are there relationships that you started then that you maintain today?
Very loosely. There are some people that I know from the trip. We check in every now and then, just kind of how things are going and stuff like that. But really, my life took such a wild turn once I graduated from the university that, there wasn't really a way to maintain contact for a long period of time.
Cool. So, Typhoon Vicky was the one that sent us on a bit of that rocking and rolling. So tell us about the turns that have happened as a result of this trip and thereafter.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that happened was the year after I graduated from the university, I moved to the Peruvian Amazon, and I've lived there ever since. And so right now I'm in the Amazon, in the offices that we built here. My life became completely international. I was sort of guided to these experiences by those kinds of serendipity that you relate to. I took the anthropology degree that I got and turned it into a life. I became the first Westerner to be accepted as a non-blood lineage representative of an Amazonian plant medicine lineage. So I moved way beyond what you would call off-grid to a tributary on the Amazon. I was taken through a formal apprenticeship and lived both with natives and local river people for over 4.5 years. And then I started one of the first fully focused businesses for Amazonian plant medicine and started the neo-shamanic revolution. So by 2005, 2006, we had started a global movement and started popularizing the use of visionary plant medicines. That's turned into the psychedelic renaissance. And it's really become a life.
Wow. I also studied anthropology. One of the reasons why I studied anthropology was because I slept through the first exam and then had to really buckle up for the rest of the semester, did really well, and then was enamored of it. But I don't think that I have connected to it quite as much as you have. That is really, really incredible. So you've been there ever since. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the type of work that you're doing, the type of experiences that you're delivering, and what this representation that you've earned both affords you and what you're doing with it.
Well, by 2005, I was given the title Maestro Médico Vegetalista, which is like a master plant medicine specialist or shaman. That ultimately turned into working with people from all over the world. We were the first group, and I was the first person to get positive global publication about the use of plant medicines for personal healing. And so at that time, we were attempting to impact the problems with depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, and addiction, and utilizing plant medicine as a way to help people. There wasn't any science on it at the time, so we were really going purely from the anthropology and the living cultures that were using those plants and anecdotal evidence that it was working and fundamentally being proven. So it was a really interesting time because it wasn't clear how anywhere in the world governments would ultimately align or misalign with this use of the plant medicine, because in many places the plants are considered, Schedule I drugs. It was a really intense period of time. And what we did was we ultimately supported people from around the world. We were respected within the country of Peru. We were supported by the local government and federal government for our work. And really, like a whole group of people came together around this, thinking that this was something very positive for the preservation of their cultures. And that led to working with people from over 100 countries. And, we continue to the day. So we receive people down at our center and help organize people also going to other parts of the world where you can legally use these kinds of plant medicines. Yeah, we work with anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people a year, depending on our programs. And we're also now starting an academy to start teaching these kinds of skills in different roles for this, kind of growing expansion of these plant medicines.
What would you say is the number one misconception that people have about the type of work and offerings that you provide?
I think that the fundamental concept where you try to apply the idea of a Western drug culture to these kinds of traditional uses of plants, and they just don't align. So I think the biggest misnomer is like a cultural appropriation, or kind of a cultural, placing on another basically like system of medicine. The Amazonian systems have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they've been really perfected over time. And there isn't a use of it in any kind of recreational context. It literally does not exist. And so I think when people think of visionary medicines, they might think of, festivals or people having a recreational experience or some kind of like self-exploration. But that's fundamentally not what this is. This is a use of these kinds of plant medicines for really unique intervention into people's lives at a time when they need it. And that's how they've been used for really a number of generations to be able to support the people. And so I think that the biggest misconception is when people bring a lens of doubt and fear, instead of an understanding that these are proven techniques and methods that have an unbelievable historic lineage associated with them, and that there's literally millions of accounts of anecdotal evidence to support the use of these in these ways.
It's incredible. How would you say your journey previously that started on Semester at Sea informs what you're doing now, and how you continue to relate to being someone who journeys?
I think it was a continuation of understanding that we were already global. And so, we grew up with this idea of globalization, and that we were the first generations to be young people during the time of that concept. I think we weren't raised with the same level of sort of fear and prejudice about the rest of the world. And so I think we were in a unique generation coming from post-World War II kinds of mentalities to the next evolution of kind of a social awakening. And the journey let us see the world before the world became just uniquely visual in a digital context. So, I think the generations after us saw the world through social media and through things that they could find online, whereas we actually went and experienced it ourselves before we had that context. So it was like walking into this beautiful unknown all the time. I think the way that that's kind of informed and impacted everything else is just like I say, a continuation of those experiences, that it was a way to see the world after that experience, right? Like we had seen so much of it in such a short period of time. I think also what impacted me was the number of commonalities. So at the core, all the lives we saw were living with all those same basic necessities that we had. Maybe the architecture was different, the companies that made the stuff was different, but in general, like food was food, and bathrooms were bathrooms, and rooms were rooms, and transportation was, all very similar in that sense. And so that made me understand that there had already been a tremendous homogenization of the world, even though individual cultures were still unique in their own way. And so I think that just let me see that you could kind of go anywhere and live any way and find a life that worked for you. And you could embrace that and know that that was fundamentally true.
It sounds like amazing advice. Is it a similar piece of advice that you would give to young, impressionable people today?
In many ways, yeah, but I think it changes with also the use of technology. So I would still say that the world is a basically beautiful place to go and explore. But I think young people today have to understand what's happening with the expansion of certain kinds of technology, to understand what their role may be in that world, and that we're in a new kind of transition. If we were in the transition of globalization, the transition to artificial intelligence and automation, and the use of robots for pretty much everything that can be used, I think is like a very unique time in history, and that we're on really the cusp of the biggest disrupt in history. And so I think the younger generations looking at it need to embrace the nature of this idea of not only globalization and a world to go and explore and be a part of, but also the impact that technology is going to have on that world, and to not only know and learn how to be part of that technology, because I think it's incredibly important to someone's ability to compete and survive, but also to think about the impact that technology is going to have in even a greater homogenization of the world, maybe even a cultural melding that happens, and to think about it now, because the way that we were taught to grow up and the way we were taught to think about our lives and plan our lives and plan our careers and things will all be disrupted. And so, maybe the things that we were taught from our elementary ages to the university ages may not apply within 3 to 5 years, maybe even sooner or longer. But by 10 years, it's for sure they will not apply anymore. Many of the career choices that we might have made might be fully automated by that point. And so we need to be thinking in a really critical way and in a solution-oriented way, and to not only explore the world, but also explore the impact that technology is going to have on it. I think the spirit of embracing life and embracing travel and that adventure that we all went on, I don't think is just isolated to that semester or, that part of our education. I think that it's something that can live within us in a deep way and continue to influence us in a positive way. And, to share that desire of exploration, it seems like often there's an ossification as we become older to patterns and routines that are just, not in alignment with that idea of that spirit, and that we can still embrace that in many different ways and still be creative and interested in what's going on in the world and step outside of the sort of the comfort zone that we've created for ourselves, and that there's merit in doing that throughout our lives. I think we embrace that in the work that we do down here in the Amazon all the time. It's a very dynamic place. It's constantly changing, and living with the nature of that spirit is, I think, very powerful. That spirit of adventure, the spirit of exploration, and also kind of striving to know more about this incredible world we live in.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think this is truly remarkable stuff, and really incredible stuff that you're doing down there. And, congratulations for all that you've accomplished, but for really taking so much from that experience and applying it in such a deliberate way, and having such a focus in how you want to experience your life on a day-to-day and how you want to bring that to other people.
Thanks for checking out this edition of Voyage of Rediscovery, and don't forget to also check out sas25th.com. That's SAS25th.com for everything fall 1998. We'll see you next time, and remember, if you're not back by 8 p.m., the ship will leave without you.